The Vorthak Empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, a dark shadow that had consumed countless civilizations over 3 millennia. Their warships moved through the void like massive steel sharks, each one capable of glassing entire planets. The Empire's strength came not just from superior technology, but from an unbreakable warrior culture that viewed the universe as their hunting ground. Commander Thrakvel stood 8 feet tall on the bridge of the flagship Bloodhunter. His scaled hide bearing the ritual scars of 1,000 victories. His elongated skull housed a brain evolved for pack hunting, while rows of crystalline teeth could tear through steel. Behind him, dozens of his warriors monitored holographic displays showing star systems ripe for conquest. "Status report," Thrakvel growled, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. The bridge crew, each a veteran of countless campaigns, moved with predatory grace between control stations. Weapon systems hummed with barely contained energy, while the ship's AI calculated optimal strike patterns for planetary bombardment. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Groktar, approached with measured steps. "The probe data from Sector 7739 has been analyzed, Commander. We have located another inhabited system. Intelligence suggests a young species with primitive space capability." Thrakvel's black eyes reflected the starlight streaming through the massive viewport. Each conquest followed the same pattern. First came the fear broadcasts that paralyzed most species with primal terror, then the ultimatum. Finally, either immediate surrender or swift annihilation. In 3,000 years, no species had chosen to fight after witnessing Vorthak military might. "Show me their world," he commanded. The main display shifted to reveal a blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star. Sensor data scrolled across subsidiary screens, showing atmospheric composition, population centers, and defensive capabilities. The analysis was thorough but dismissive. Primitive chemical rockets, basic energy weapons, no unified planetary defense grid. "They call themselves humans," Groktar continued, reading from the intelligence report. "Carbon-based bipeds averaging 6 feet in height, no natural weapons or armor. Their largest military vessels are barely 200 meters long." A ripple of amusement passed through the bridge crew. Some species built impressive cities or demonstrated artistic achievement, but military strength was all that mattered to the Vorthak. These humans appeared even weaker than most. "Their technology level?" Thrakvel asked, though he already knew the answer would be disappointing. "Fusion power in early stages. Projectile weapons using chemical propellants. They have achieved limited interplanetary travel, but possess no faster-than-light capability. Standard conquest protocols estimate resistance duration at less than 6 hours." Thrakvel studied the tactical display showing Earth's orbital infrastructure. A few space stations, some mining operations on nearby worlds, scattered satellite networks. It was pathetically inadequate compared to the Vorthak battle fleet. His ship alone carried enough firepower to sterilize the planet's surface. Meanwhile, 93 million miles away on Earth, Admiral Kim Dae-ho stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Force. The underground facility buzzed with activity as technicians monitored deep space sensors and communications arrays. Warning lights had been flashing for hours since the massive alien fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the unknown vessels," reported Lieutenant Park Min-ho from his position at the weapons console. The young officer's hands trembled slightly as he processed targeting data that showed their complete outmatching by the alien force. Captain Lee Soo-jin looked up from her communication station, her face pale but determined. "The message is the same as before, Admiral. Complete surrender of Earth and all human colonies, or they will destroy every living thing in our solar system." Dae-ho studied the tactical display showing the alien fleet. 50 massive ships, each one dwarfing humanity's largest vessels. Their technology readings were off the charts. Any conventional military analysis would recommend immediate surrender to preserve human life. But something in the Admiral's gut rebelled against that conclusion. Around him, his staff waited in tense silence. These were career military officers who had trained their entire lives for a conflict that might never come. Now it had arrived in the form of an overwhelming alien force that could end human civilization with a thought. Options report, Dae-ho requested calmly. Major Yoon Seung-ho stepped forward with a datapad. Our entire fleet consists of 37 combat vessels, Admiral. The aliens have energy weapons we can't match and defensive shields that can stop our best missiles. Computer projections give us a 0% chance of military victory. What about evacuation? Impossible, sir. We have maybe 200,000 people in off-world colonies. Earth's population is 8 billion. Our transport capacity couldn't move even 1% before those ships reach firing range. Dae-ho nodded slowly. He had known the numbers before asking, but military protocol demanded a full assessment. Now came the decision that would define humanity's future. Surrender meant slavery at best, extinction at worst. Fighting meant certain death, but with dignity intact. He walked to the main communications console and placed his hand on the transmission key. Send them our response. The room fell silent as every person present understood the magnitude of the moment. In the depths of space, an empire that had never known defeat waited for humanity's answer. On Earth, 8 billion people continued their daily lives, unaware that their species' fate hung in the balance. Tell them, Dae-ho said with quiet steel in his voice, that Earth doesn't surrender. The Vorthak fleet materialized from hyperspace like ghosts becoming solid nightmares. 50 colossal dreadnoughts, each one stretching over 2 kilometers in length, emerged in perfect formation around Earth's solar system. Their hulls gleamed with an oily black finish that seemed to absorb light itself, while pulsing red energy. Conduits ran along their surfaces like veins of molten blood. Commander Thrakvel stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as Earth's pitiful defense fleet scrambled to intercept them. 37 human vessels, the largest barely 400 meters long, arranged themselves in what they probably considered a battle formation. It reminded him of insects trying to threaten a pack of hunting beasts. Initiate the fear protocol, Thrakvel commanded, his voice carrying the satisfaction of inevitable victory. Deep within the Vorthak ships, ancient psychic amplifiers began to hum. These devices had been perfected over millennia of conquest, designed to project pure terror directly into the minds of enemy species. The broadcast didn't rely on technology that could be blocked or jammed. Instead, it reached into the primal fear centers of organic brains, triggering responses that had kept prey animals alive for millions of years. The psychic wave erupted from the Vorthak fleet like an invisible tsunami of dread. It washed over the human ships, carrying with it the concentrated fear of 1,000 conquered civilizations. Species across the galaxy had experienced this moment of absolute terror before surrendering or fleeing in panic. On the bridge of the human destroyer, Soul's Pride, Captain Choi Woo-bin felt the alien mental assault hit his consciousness like a sledgehammer. For a moment, his vision darkened as images of death and destruction flooded his mind. He saw cities burning, families screaming, endless darkness consuming everything he had ever loved. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of paralyzing fear, Choi felt a different emotion rising in his chest. He began to chuckle, then laugh outright. The sound echoed through the bridge communications, startling his crew out of their own momentary terror. "Sir, are you all right?" asked his first officer, Lieutenant Nam Ki-jong, who was gripping his console with white knuckles. "Is that supposed to scare us?" Choi asked, his laughter growing stronger. "My grandmother's ghost stories were more frightening than this alien." Parlor trick. He activated the fleet communications channel. "All ships, this is Soul's Pride. Did everyone feel that little mental tickle? I think our new friends are trying to make us wet ourselves." Across the human fleet, similar reactions were occurring. Major Han So-young, leading Thunder Squadron from her fighter cockpit, felt the psychic broadcast wash over her like cold water. But instead of fear, it triggered something else entirely. Growing up in the rough districts of Busan had taught her that the only response to intimidation was overwhelming aggression. "Thunder Squadron, form up on me," she snarled into her comm system. "These alien scumbags think they can scare us with mind games? Let's show them what real terror looks like when humans get angry." Her 12 fighters moved into attack formation, their fusion engines burning bright blue against the starfield. Each pilot had felt the fear broadcast, but human psychology proved more complex than the Vorthak had anticipated. Where other species experienced paralyzing dread, humans transformed fear into fury. The first shots came from the human destroyer Incheon Victory. Captain Park Dong-hyun had spent 30 years in the Earth Defense Force, and his response to the alien intimidation was purely military. "All weapons, target the lead ship. Fire everything we have." Missiles streaked across space, their chemical exhaust trails creating geometric patterns against the darkness. Nuclear warheads detonated against Vorthak energy shields in brilliant flashes of light and radiation. The alien shields held easily, but the psychological impact was profound. No species had ever responded to the fear broadcast with immediate attack. Commander Thracavel stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "Impossible! They should be fleeing or begging for mercy. Why are they attacking?" His second-in-command, Groktar, studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. "Commander, their brain patterns are unlike anything in our database. The fear protocol appears to be having the opposite effect." The battle erupted across the solar system, like a three-dimensional storm of violence. Human ships, vastly outgunned and outnumbered, threw themselves at the Vorthak fleet with suicidal determination. Captain Lee Hyun-suk rammed her damaged cruiser directly into a Vorthak destroyer, her last transmission a defiant war cry that echoed across all frequencies. Pilot Kim Ye-jin found herself in a damaged fighter, systems failing and oxygen running low. Ahead of her loomed a Vorthak cruiser, its weapons charging for another devastating volley against the human fleet. Standard military doctrine called for retreat and regroup. Kim had different plans. "Control, this is Fighter 7, she transmitted calmly. "My ship is too damaged for return flight. I'm going to make these aliens remember this day." She pushed her throttles to maximum, her fighter's fusion drive screaming as it accelerated toward the alien ship. The Vorthak cruiser's point defense. Systems opened fire, plasma bolts searing past her cockpit. One shot took off her left wing, sending the fighter into a violent spin. Kim fought the controls, using the spin to her advantage as she lined up her final approach. "For Earth," she whispered, then slammed her fist down on the emergency reactor overload button. Her fighter struck the Vorthak cruiser's hull, traveling at nearly 10% of light speed. The explosion that followed lit up the solar system. Like a newborn star, the shockwave visible from Earth's surface. When the light faded, both ships were gone, transformed into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Across the Vorthak fleet, alarm signals blared as crews tried to process what they were witnessing. These humans fought like cornered predators, rather than prey animals. They showed no fear of death, no concern for overwhelming odds, no rational response to superior force. "Commander," Groktar reported with poorly concealed anxiety, "we have lost 3 ships and suffered damage to 7 others. The humans are not fighting according to any known patterns." Thracavel watched another human ship ram one of his destroyers, both vessels disappearing in a nuclear fireball. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The humans were supposed to break under the fear broadcast, not transform into berserkers. "Continue the attack," he ordered. But uncertainty crept into his voice for the first time in centuries. The war had been raging for 6 days when Commander Jang Hyun-woo found himself floating through the twisted wreckage of a Vorthak destroyer, a combat knife gripped in his bloodied hands. His boarding pod had punched through the alien ship's hull like a bullet through paper, and now 30 human Marines were loose inside enemy territory. "Move fast, stay quiet," he whispered into his comm unit. Around him, his team advanced through corridors designed for creatures twice their size. The alien ship's interior pulsed with organic-looking technology that seemed to breathe and shift in the dim red lighting. They had run out of ammunition 20 minutes ago during a firefight with Vorthak security forces. Now, they fought with knives, improvised weapons, and pure determination. The aliens couldn't understand it. Every military doctrine in the galaxy said that soldiers without proper weapons should retreat or surrender. Humans had different ideas. Sergeant Kim Dae-won spotted 3 Vorthak warriors approaching through a side passage. Each alien stood 8 feet tall with razor-sharp claws and teeth that could tear through steel. They moved with the confident grace of apex predators who had never known fear. "Take the big one on the left," Jang whispered to his team. I'll handle the other two." The aliens heard them coming and turned with surprising speed, but humans had spent thousands of years hunting creatures larger and stronger than themselves. Zhang rolled under the first alien's claws and drove his knife up into the creature's chest, finding the gap between armor plates that his intelligence briefings had identified. The Vorthak warrior screamed in shock and pain. In 3 millennia of conquest, none had ever been wounded by a primitive blade wielded by a creature half their size. The sound echoed through the ship's corridors like a death wail. Meanwhile, across the solar system, Colonel Oh Min-jung was orchestrating a completely different kind of madness. From her command post on Ceres Station, she watched tactical displays showing Vorthak supply convoys moving between Jupiter and Mars. "Ghost Squadron, abort your attack on the lead convoy," she ordered suddenly. "Ma'am?" came the confused reply from Squadron Leader Park Sang-wook. "We're 30 seconds from optimal firing position. There's a civilian transport hiding in that asteroid field. 12 families from the mining colony. Redirect to escort them to safety." Her staff exchanged worried glances. Ghost Squadron represented their entire reserve fighter force, using them to rescue 12 families while letting a major enemy supply. Convoy escape made no tactical sense, but Oh Min-jung had grown up in a military family where her grandfather told stories of Korean war veterans who carried wounded comrades through enemy territory rather than leave them behind. Some things mattered more than tactical advantage. "All Ghost Squadron pilots, you heard the Colonel," Park transmitted. "We're playing Guardian Angel today." The Vorthak convoy continued unmolested, while 12 human fighters escorted a tiny civilian transport to safety. Aboard the Vorthak command ship, intelligence officers struggled to make sense of human decision-making patterns. "They had us." Groktar reported to Thrakvel. "Clear tactical advantage, perfect firing position." Then they abandoned the attack to rescue non-combatants who contribute nothing to their war effort. Thrakvel's scaled features twisted in confusion. "Run psychological analysis on their command structure. These decisions suggest mental instability in their leadership, but the analysis only deepened the mystery. Human commanders appeared mentally sound, highly intelligent, and completely unpredictable. They would sacrifice strategic positions to save civilians, then launch suicidal attacks that somehow achieved impossible victories. Captain Yoon Tae-hyung embodied this confusing human psychology perfectly. His heavy cruiser, Daegu's Hammer, had taken massive damage during a running battle with 3 Vorthak destroyers. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space, while internal fires raged through multiple decks. "Sir, we need to abandon ship," urged his first officer, Lieutenant Cho. "Min-sik, the reactor containment is failing. We have maybe 10 minutes before complete core breach." Yoon looked at his tactical display showing the 3 enemy ships closing in for the kill. His crew was already loading into escape pods, following standard evacuation procedures. But something else caught his attention. 2 human destroyers were limping away from the battle, their crews wounded and ships barely functional. "Engineering, how long can you give me manual control of the ship?" he asked over the comm system. "Captain, with respect, you need to evacuate." "Tao?" came the reply from Chief Engineer Han Bo-young. "This reactor is going to blow whether we want it to or not." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Yoon said grimly. "All hands, this is the captain. Final evacuation order. Everyone off the ship in 3 minutes." He watched his crew flee to safety while he remained at his command post, hands steady on the manual flight controls. The Vorthak destroyers approached. Confidently, probably expecting the human ship to surrender or explode harmlessly. Yoon had different plans. The Daegu's Hammer suddenly accelerated toward the lead Vorthak ship, its damaged engines screaming as they pushed beyond safe limits. Alien weapons fire hammered his hull, but the cruiser kept coming like a guided missile with a human brain at its core. "For everyone we couldn't save," Yoon whispered as his ship's hull temperature reached critical levels. The collision happened at 17,000 kilometers per hour. The Daegu's Hammer struck the first Vorthak destroyer amidships just as its reactor went critical. The explosion was visible from Mars, a brief new sun that consumed both ships instantly, but Yoon had aimed carefully. The blast wave caught the other 2 Vorthak destroyers, crippling one and destroying the other outright. 3 enemy ships eliminated by 1 human captain who refused to die quietly. In the depths of space, Vorthak crews watched their tactical displays with growing unease. These humans didn't fight like any species in their databases. They made decisions based on emotion rather than logic, yet somehow achieved results that defied mathematical probability. "Commander," Groktar reported nervously, "our psychological warfare division has a new assessment. They believe humans may be suffering from species-wide mental illness. Thrakvil studied reports of human Marines fighting with wounds that should have been fatal, commanders making decisions that ignored basic military doctrine, and pilots who treated death as merely an inconvenient interruption of their mission." "Perhaps," he replied slowly, "but if this is insanity, it's the most effective form of madness I've ever encountered." The war was entering a new phase, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the Vorthak Empire faced an enemy that grew stronger under pressure instead of breaking. 3 weeks into what should have been a routine conquest, Admiral Thrakvel stood before a holographic display that showed something impossible. Red markers indicated damaged or destroyed Vorthak vessels, and there were far too many of them. The humans had cost him nearly a third of his fleet, losses that would have broken any previous enemy within hours. "Status report," he growled, though he dreaded the answer. Commander Groktar approached with visible reluctance. "We have lost 18 ships, Admiral. Another 12 are undergoing major repairs. The humans continue to resist with increasing effectiveness." Thrakvil's claws scraped against the metal railing as he studied the tactical display. The Vorthak war machine had been perfected over millennia, designed for swift, overwhelming victories that broke enemy morale before significant losses could occur. Extended campaigns were foreign to their military doctrine. "How long until reinforcements arrive from the core worlds?" he asked. 6 months minimum, Admiral. The High Command considers this a routine pacification mission. They are not expecting requests for additional forces. 6 months. In 6 months, at the current rate of attrition, Thrakvel might not have a fleet left to command. The thought was almost incomprehensible to a species that had never known defeat. In the detention cells deep within the flagship, Lieutenant Nam Eunji sat quietly in her holding chamber, hands folded in her lap. She had been captured 3 days earlier, when her reconnaissance ship was disabled during a raid on Vorthak supply lines. Now she waited calmly while her captors prepared for another interrogation session. The door hissed open, and 3 Vorthak interrogators entered. Each stood over 8 feet tall, their scaled hides bearing the scars and markings of veteran warriors. They carried devices designed to extract information from the most stubborn prisoners, tools that had broken the will of countless species. "Human," the lead interrogator spoke in broken English, his voice like grinding stone. "You will provide intelligence on your fleet movements and defensive positions." Nam Yunji looked up at the towering aliens with mild curiosity. "Would you like to know what I think about your chances of winning this war?" The interrogator activated a pain amplifier, sending waves of agony through her nervous system. Other species screamed at the first touch of such devices. Nam simply closed her eyes and began reciting a children's song her grandmother had taught her. "Little bird flying high, never afraid to touch the sky." The aliens exchanged confused glances. The device was functioning properly, delivering enough pain to incapacitate most creatures. Yet this small human continued singing as if nothing was happening. For the next 6 hours, they tried every method in their arsenal. Neural disruptors, fear inducers, psychological manipulation techniques that had broken the minds of 1,000 different species. Nam endured it all with the same quiet determination, occasionally asking her captors about their families or whether they had ever seen Earth's sunsets. By the end of the session, the interrogators were visibly shaken. They had gained no intelligence, but something more disturbing had occurred. The humans' questions and calm demeanor had planted seeds of doubt about their mission's righteousness. "Why do you fight a war you cannot win?" one interrogator had asked near the end. "Because someone has to," Nam replied simply, "and sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer." Word of the failed interrogation spread through the Vorthak fleet like a virus. Crew members who had never questioned their racial superiority began whispering among themselves. If this fragile human could resist their best interrogation techniques while remaining psychologically intact, What did that say about Vorthak invincibility? The psychological pressure intensified when reports arrived from the front lines. Human defenders on the Mars orbital platforms had fought for 18 hours straight without relief, repelling 3 separate Vorthak assaults. Many continued fighting, with injuries that should have killed them. Captain Lee Wonho, defending Platform 7 with a skeleton crew, had lost both legs to a plasma blast but continued coordinating defenses from his command chair. When ammunition ran low, his people fought the boarding parties with tools and improvised weapons, singing old folk songs as they charged into battle. "They sing as they die," reported one traumatized Vorthak squad leader. "I have never seen such behavior. It is unnatural." Fear began to spread through the alien fleet like an infection. The Vorthak had built their empire on the principle that overwhelming force would break any resistance. But humans seemed to grow stronger under pressure, transforming desperation into determination. Major Bei Jun-ho personified this human transformation during the assault on Vorthak Forward Base Delta. His strike team of 20 Marines had infiltrated the asteroid facility to plant explosives that would cripple enemy supply operations. What should have been a quick sabotage mission turned into a running battle when they were discovered. "All teams fall back to the extraction point," Bei ordered over his comm system as Vorthak security forces converged on their position. But the extraction point was already compromised. Enemy forces surrounded the landing bay, where their transport waited while more aliens closed in from behind. Standard military doctrine called for surrender to preserve valuable personnel. Bei had different ideas. "Control, this is Strike Team Alpha," he transmitted calmly. "We're not making it out of here, but we're going to make sure this base won't be supplying anyone for a long time." His team fought with desperate efficiency, trading space for time as they fell back toward the facility's main power core. Each Marine carried enough explosives to level a city block, but Bei had a larger target in mind. When the final alien assault came, his team was down to 6 survivors holding a storage bay filled with antimatter fuel cells. The Vorthak forces advanced confidently, expecting the humans to surrender when faced with certain death. Instead, they heard human voices raised in song, an old military anthem that spoke of sacrifice and honor. The aliens hesitated, confused by behavior that made no tactical sense. Bei keyed his final transmission as enemy plasma fire lit up the storage bay. "This is Major Bei Jun-ho to all Vorthak forces. You wanted to know what humans are capable of. Watch and learn." He triggered the detonator. The explosion consumed the entire asteroid base, vaporizing 3,000 Vorthak personnel and destroying supplies meant to sustain the fleet for months. Seismic sensors detected the blast from Jupiter's moons, ARI, brief star that announced humanity's refusal to accept defeat. In his command chamber, Admiral Thrakvel received the casualty reports with growing dread. His officers stood in uncomfortable silence, their confidence shattered by weeks of unexpected losses. "We are the apex predators," he stated, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Vorthak Empire faced prey that refused to act like prey. The pack was beginning to break, and everyone could feel it. The human fleet emerged from behind Saturn's rings like wolves descending from mountain peaks. Admiral Kim Dae-ho had spent the last week gathering every functional ship in the solar system, from military destroyers to converted mining vessels armed with improvised weapons. This was humanity's final gambit, everything they had left thrown against an enemy that still outnumbered them 3-1. "All ships, this is Admiral Kim." His voice carried across every communication channel in the fleet. "Today we show the galaxy what happens when you corner the human race. No retreat, no surrender, no mercy." Captain Song Mi-kyung gripped the controls of her assault cruiser, Iron Phoenix, leading a spearhead formation of 12 heavily modified ships. Her crew consisted entirely of volunteers who knew they were flying into certain death. Behind her, engineer Kim Tae-won had spent 3 sleepless days installing captured Vorthak energy weapons onto human ships, creating hybrid vessels that defied both species' engineering principles. "Phoenix Squadron, begin final approach," Song announced calmly. "Let's open a door for the Admiral." The Vorthak fleet had arranged itself in their traditional defensive formation, a layered sphere of overlapping fire zones that had protected their flagships for 3,000 years. Admiral Thrakvel watched the approaching human ships with grim satisfaction. This desperate charge would end the conflict once and for all. "All weapons, prepare to fire," he commanded from the bridge of the Bloodhunter. "Let them come close. Enough to see their deaths approaching." But the humans had studied Vorthak tactics during weeks of brutal combat. Song's squadron didn't charge directly into the defensive formation. Instead, they scattered into seemingly random patterns, each ship following a chaotic flight path that made targeting calculations impossible. Vorthak gunners fired at where human ships should have been, but Song had learned something valuable from her grandmother's stories about fighter pilots in ancient wars. Predictability was death. Her ship rolled and dove through 3 dimensions, weaving between plasma bolts like a dancer performing to deadly music. "Phoenix 2, target their left flank battery," she ordered. "Phoenix 5 and 6, follow me through that gap in their formation." The hybrid human ships unleashed captured alien weapons with devastating effect. Energy beams designed to punch through Vorthak armor now served human purposes, carving through enemy hulls with surgical precision. But Song's real target wasn't the defensive ships themselves. Her squadron punched through the outer defensive perimeter and dove toward the command vessels at the formation's heart. Vorthak fighters swarmed after them, but human pilots had advantages. Their enemies didn't understand. Growing up on a world with intense gravity and violent weather had prepared them for extreme flight conditions. Lieutenant Cho Jae-min spun his fighter through a barrel roll that would have killed most alien pilots, emerging behind a Vorthak interceptor to deliver a point-blank missile strike. "Got one. These aliens fly like they're afraid of breaking something." The breakthrough came when Song's squadron reached the inner defensive ring. Vorthak command ships, massive vessels designed to coordinate fleet operations, had never faced direct assault. Their weapons were oriented outward, leaving them vulnerable to close-range attack. "All Phoenix ships, concentrate fire on the command." "Cruiser," Song ordered, "let's cut the head off this snake." Her ship shuddered as enemy fire found its mark, but Song kept flying straight into the teeth of the defensive barrage. Behind her, Phoenix Squadron followed with the grim determination that had come to define human warfare. When her engines failed, she used momentum to ram her ship into the Vorthak command vessel's bridge section. The explosion tore through both ships, but it had achieved Song's objective. The Vorthak formation began to waver as communication networks collapsed and coordination broke down. Admiral Kim Dae-ho seized the moment of chaos to launch his main assault. The human fleet, led by the massive battleship Soul Vengeance, drove straight through the gap Song's sacrifice had created. They fought with captured alien weapons and desperate improvisation, but something else gave them an edge their enemies couldn't understand. They were fighting for their home. The battle reached its climax when Kim's boarding shuttles penetrated the Bloodhunter's hull. Marines armed with energy weapons and backed by pure fury fought their way through corridors designed for creatures twice their size. Sergeant Park Ji-hoon led the assault toward the bridge, stepping over fallen Vorthak warriors who had never imagined defeat was possible. Admiral Thrakvel waited in his command chamber, holding a ceremonial blade that had tasted the blood of 100 conquered species. When the humans breached his final defenses, he expected to face warriors consumed by battle rage. Instead, Admiral Kim Dae-ho entered calmly, his uniform torn and bearing multiple wounds from the fighting. He carried a simple combat knife, nothing fancy or ceremonial. Behind him came a dozen human marines who watched the confrontation with professional interest. "You have fought well, human," Thrakvel acknowledged, raising his blade in salute. "But your species lacks the size and strength to match Vorthak warriors in personal combat." Kim studied his opponent with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent a lifetime in military service. The alien stood 8 feet tall with natural armor and claws that could tear through steel. Any reasonable analysis would favor the Vorthak in single combat. But Kim had grown up poor in the streets of Seoul, where survival meant fighting opponents bigger and stronger than yourself. He had learned that size and strength meant nothing against intelligence, speed, and absolute ruthlessness. The duel lasted 3 minutes. Thrakvel fought with the controlled aggression of a trained warrior, using reach and power to dominate the combat space. But Kim fought like someone with nothing left to lose. using every dirty trick and desperate tactic he had learned in 6 decades of military service. When Kim's blade finally found the gap in Thrakvel's armor, the alien commander's eyes widened in genuine shock. His last coherent thought was a terrible realization. They hadn't awakened sleeping prey. They had provoked something far more dangerous than themselves. The remaining Vorthak ships fled into hyperspace, carrying news that would shake the foundations of their empire. The species that had conquered 1,000 worlds had been defeated by creatures they had dismissed as primitive prey. Lieutenant Park Seung-won transmitted the victory message from his damaged communications console. "All Earth stations, this is the fleet. The alien invaders are retreating. Repeat, we have won." But even as celebrations began on Earth, human exploration ships were already launching from hidden bases throughout the solar system. Admiral Kim stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, studying star charts that showed neighboring systems and potential threats. "Prepare the fleet for deep space operations," he ordered. "If there are more predators out there, they need to understand something very clearly." He paused, looking out at the stars where his enemies had fled. "Humans don't just survive being hunted. We hunt back." The galaxy had spent 3,000 years under Vorthak dominance, but that age was ending. Humanity had tasted victory against impossible odds, and they were hungry for more. Exploration ships equipped with captured alien technology began their journey toward distant stars, carrying with them the knowledge that Earth's children were no longer prey. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end.